Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Totalbiscuit. Ooh, well, we haven't done this in a while, have we? No, no, no. You know, I like to call this late night LOL. I was going back through my old League of Legends videos, and I think I realized that almost every one of them I commentated while I was really, really tired. I don't know why, but I think it's actually a pretty cool thing to do. You want to know why? Because I think it mellows me out enough to not get horrendously angry over the game that we just played. This is a long one. So, this is a really good game because I think it emphasizes and shows all aspects of a kind of low to lowish mid level of solo ranked stuff. I mean, this is pretty low elo. This is the kind of thing that you would expect to run into if you just started doing solo ranked. You start at a low elo and you have to climb your way out of that. It's weird because most elo systems you end up starting at 1500 and then it balances around there. But if I recall correctly, this game was played around the 1200 elo, which is not exactly what I'd call high by any stretch of the imagination. We had an interesting team composition. We had this Tristana down bot that insisted on going with teleport, which is an interesting choice, honestly. It does allow for some ganking potential, but it also means you don't have flash. Now, in theory, with Tristana, you could probably get away with that. Why? Because you do have Rocket Jump, which is a big deal. You can very easily get out of engagements using that ability, and it's most likely more reliable than Flash. I have to say, though, since I was playing support this time around, I have to admit to being a little bit worried. When I see someone go AD carry and they don't have Flash, I'm thinking, oh god, this is one of those elite AD carries. This is one of the AD carries that thinks he's all that, and in reality, he's just gonna completely destroy the team because the AD carry is just so incredibly important. I don't think people realize, really. I think people want to be the big boss guy that can absolutely slaughter everybody, but they don't realize how boring it actually is to get there. It's a very stressful role to be in. You've got to be constantly harassing and CSing. CS is the most important thing for the AD carry. You need the cash, and you need to prevent the opponent's AD carry from actually getting cash. As long as you have a good CS lead and maybe a couple of kills over the opponent's AD carry, then you've put your team in a really good position. If you're behind, then a lot of the damage output from your team simply isn't going to be happening. You need to be the guy who is focusing down the vital heroes in a team fight. You need to be the guy that's providing the bulk of the DPS alongside, of course, the AP mid and more often than not the tanky DPS up to the top. Unfortunately for us, the tanky DPS in the form of Singed is not doing so well against Vladimir up to the top lane. This is mostly because of the fact that our jungler isn't doing very well. The jungler's not actually doing his or her job. What she should be doing is providing support to the top lane and constantly ganking, but that's not actually happening, and sadly, no matter how much support I provide there, I can't keep Tristana alive. Would have been nice to see Tristana get a little bit closer to the tower there with that rocket jump, but it happens. Puts us in a little bit of an awkward spot, means I can get a little bit of CS, so I suppose every cloud actually has a silver lining. Now, what are we talking about with this Soraka build? The Soraka build I'm currently using is focused on survivability. It's also focused on gold per 10. I'm using red armor marks, I'm using yellow seals of avarice, and blue glyphs of focus. So we're talking about extra armor, extra cash, and cooldown reduction. Cooldown reduction being vitally important for pretty much every support, as far as I can tell. Obviously, take it in the blue. And my quintessences are gold per 10. So that gives me 5.3 additional gold per 10 seconds. Doesn't sound all that great, and arguably, I don't know if it really is or not. It's kind of difficult to tell. It's a build that I picked up on Mobifire, and it's getting a little bit of traction, but there's a bit of a debate within the community as to whether or not it's worthwhile to go for any kind of GP10 stuff. Bear in mind, of course, that this is at low level, so the kind of builds that you'll be looking at there are going to be different to the metagame in the higher elo brackets. The purpose of the gold, for those who don't know, is to make sure that as support you can make enough money to get the core items that you need without actually taking any CS or kills from the AD carry. That would be a very bad thing indeed. That's the kind of thing that you definitely don't want to do. More often than not, what you want to try and do is to try and actually feed some kills to the AD carry. Now, that's a good one right there. The question is, can we keep him alive? Yep, she gets out of range of that, and I drop a quick heal on myself just to try and stay alive. Unfortunately, not quite enough. Now, what I could have done to stay alive there was to use my E. That would have actually put a silence on her briefly to prevent her from using that ability. That was a mistake on my part. Could have gotten away with it. But you know what? That's 2 for 1 in the lane, and she got the kill on the support, as opposed to getting the kill on the AD carry. So that gives Tristana free farm in the bottom lane for a while to get a CS advantage over the other bottom lane AD carry. That's a fantastic thing to have happen. Now, as a support, you're generally going to be in the bottom lane. The reason for that is it's just the way that the meta currently is. The bottom lane allows for more direct control of the dragon. It's very important to make sure that your composition is as optimum as it can be in order to have control of the dragon. A support is usually put in the bottom lane, one, to obviously support the AD carry, because you don't want another hero that requires a lot of CS in your bottom lane. In fact, you want a hero that doesn't require any CS whatsoever, because you shouldn't be getting any unless the AD carry isn't actually there, or the AD carry is incapable of getting last hits on every dying minion. If there's one going down just out of range of the AD carry that you know the AD carry can't pick up, then sure, pick it up, no problem at all. But you should never be interfering with the farming of the AD carry. The purpose of the support is to keep the AD carry alive, is to buff the AD carry, and perhaps create what's called a kill lane, whereby you're able to set up, using a combination of abilities, a kill on either the enemy support or the enemy's AD carry. Perhaps even a rather overcommitted jungler coming out of the jungle in order to try and pick up a gank. There are certain combinations that allow for so-called kill lanes, and Blitzcrank Caitlyn is a good example, because if you're able to get the grab with Blitzcrank, then you may be able to pick up a kill or two. Now, this was a little bit derp. Jumping directly towards Caitlyn, who was doing her sniper shot, is a silly, silly thing to do. But it could have been worse, certainly. That kind of equalizes out the lane. That's not too bad. She's taken so much damage that she's not really going to be able to push that tower. As you can see, she's already being. So at least she's out of the lane. Now, what other roles do you have as a support in the bottom lane? Well, as you saw, your role is also to ward. This is something I've been getting used to, because support is not what I usually play. When I used to play League of Legends, which was about 10 months ago, I only recently restarted playing after a very lengthy hiatus, I used to play primarily jungler or AP mid. I wouldn't be playing AD carry, and I certainly wouldn't be playing support. I had people on my team who were better at that. I used to play with a bunch of friends. Sadly, we've kind of drifted apart. Some of them have quit LoL, some of them just don't have the time anymore. And of course, now we live in different time zones. Indeed, I now play on the US servers, so for me, it's not really an option to play with these guys. But as you can see, it's my duty to ward. Now, what are the most important things to ward? Well, towards the start of the game, you want to be warding things like Dragon. Not immediately. There's not a lot of point in doing that, because no one's really going to be taking Dragon within the first few minutes. So you ward a little bit later on there. Warding the right-hand bush, preferably, it's what I like to call the enemy bush, because it's on the enemy side. There's an imaginary line down the center there. 2 bushes, your bush and the enemy's bush. You ward the enemy's bush, that's going to give you an edge. That's going to prevent the enemy support from sitting in the bush, being unharassable. It's going to prevent the enemy AD carry from juking into the bush if you're trying to get an early kill. That visibility is vitally important. The ward to the top is designed to prevent an enemy jungler coming from the opposing side's jungle and being able to jump in for the 3-man gank down at the bottom lane. And needless to say, the ward on Dragon is designed to make sure that no one takes Dragon without you knowing that. It's a good amount of control. Generally speaking, if I were to start off with Soraka, or indeed any support hero that I usually play, I tend to pick up the Fairy Charm for a little bit of extra mana regen. That's also going to turn into a Philosopher's Stone, which is a very important key item. I'll also be grabbing 3 health potions, just to give me a little bit more sustain in lane. Depending on what hero I'm playing, maybe I'll grab a mana pot and 2 health instead of 3 health. With Soraka, it's not really too much of a problem. With someone like Taric, maybe you might want to grab something like that. And then, last but by no means least, of course, 3 wards. That allows you to ward Dragon eventually, and ward those 2 bushes. And every time you B, you should be picking up another 3. I have a tendency of slacking with wards, I think, because I'm not really all that used to using them. Now, the way that the lane dynamics actually work in League of Legends, and indeed in certain other games as well in this particular genre, you've got this battle in the middle between these two mage characters, the APs. Every now and again, you'll see a non-AP character in the center, something a little bit more unusual, but for the most part, you'll get mage characters. LeBlanc, in this case, is the example. You'll see characters like Brand, Annie, Vega, and there's going to be this magical duel in the center, and what happens is, if one is able to get the other hand, and they can clean out the lane, then they gain the ability to come and gank either top or bottom lane, which is what you just saw there. We had LeBlanc come in and do just that, and there's the pickup on Caitlyn as well for LeBlanc, which puts us in a great position. I don't really want to give advice as to the viability of heroes at the moment, simply because my metagame knowledge is far too out of date. Like, if I were to say 9 or 10 months ago, talk about LeBlanc, what I would say is, oh, this hero can do really well at the start, but she kind of fizzles out in late game. She doesn't have the sustain. All she's really got is this big combo she can throw out, and once she does that, she doesn't have a lot of use. But I don't know if that's still the case anymore, so there's no point in me even giving knowledge or any kind of advice in that regard. So I want to stick to the more general stuff and explain why various things happen the way that they do, why I make various choices, and of course the mistakes that I make in this particular build. You'll notice that I've got the Philosopher's Stone and the Heart of Gold. Reason for that, of course, being that the Philosopher's Stone is going to give me cash, it's going to give me mana regen, it's going to give me all the wonderful stats a growing Soraka needs, and the Heart of Gold gives me more survivability as well as gold per 5, which is vitally important. Stacking up with the runes that I've already got, this is going to give me a potent amount of cash without having to actually steal CS or kills from the AD carry. One may also argue that Cage's Lucky Pick is not a terrible pickup, but you really have to ask yourself, what is that item going to turn into? When it comes to most core support Soraka builds, there isn't an item that you're going to be using that contains Cage's Lucky Pick. So what you're doing is you're buying a low-tier item that is not going to turn into anything. So it's going to sit there generating you gold. Great, okay, but you could have bought an item that would be useful. The Philosopher's Stone ends up turning into something useful. The chances are you're going to be turning your Philosopher's Stone into a Shurelia's Reverie. That's going to give your team what they need to actually catch up. So if you engage in a team fight and the enemy decide they want to run away, you pop your Shurelias and you can just run them down. You essentially trample them very easily. Also gives you Clutch Escape, which is very handy. It's going to give you a huge speed boost, which will allow you and your team to actually get out of a sticky situation. As regards to your Heart of Gold, well, you can turn that into a number of things as well, including the Locket of the Iron Solari, which is a good item, as far as I'm concerned, for any support, because it's going to give this nice, big, chunky shield to everyone at higher levels, so it's giving everyone on your team some extra HP and survivability. Well, this is an ugly little tower dive, isn't it? Unfortunately, I'm not going to be getting out of there anytime soon. It would have probably been worth it if the Tristana had been able to grab Talon, but that isn't happening. Akali comes in for no apparent reason whatsoever. I'm really trying to figure out the logic behind this. Akali is unfortunately a little bit of a disaster area in this particular match. Why? I don't even know. I cannot explain that. You know, if I wasn't relaxing in my comfortable chair right now with a cool breeze playing over my face, I would probably want to kill a kitten. Thankfully, all of these things are happening. So good. I love the excuse, sorry, lag. Oh, does lag make you press your ability button? I'm fairly sure it doesn't, but there you go. Never mind, things happen. It is solo ranked, ladies and gentlemen. Now, this is the start of me building kind of wrong here. The one biggest mistake, I think, that I made with this particular build is to completely overdo the cooldown reduction. Cooldown reduction is actually capped. The cap of cooldown reduction in League of Legends is, of course, 40%. Bear in mind that you can get some from talents and things like that, also runes. So in reality, picking up Ionian Boots of Lucidity is good for a couple of reasons. Obviously, cooldown reduction is very important for a support champion, but it's also a fairly cheap and early way to get a big chunk of it, which means that you don't necessarily need to grab too many big cooldown reduction items later on. This is the mistake that I made. I actually grabbed too many of the sodding things, so in reality, it was a bit of a wasted stat. It's not that those items weren't good for Soraka, it's just that I had too many of them. You should never buy all of the cooldown reduction items. That's not a very smart thing to do. It doesn't really help you in any way. Alright, so there's the grab, and that was a little bit of a bait right there as we brought in a friend to help us out. Unfortunately, Akali isn't really very good. I think if we'd brought a better friend, then that would have worked a hell of a lot better than it did. Sadly, Akali just got slaughtered. At least we can bring LeBlanc in right here. Now, what I want to try and do is stick around so that I can support LeBlanc and keep the AD carry actually in the fight. Go in for the heal on LeBlanc. Unfortunately, doesn't keep her alive one way or the other. I'm going to jump out of there, and we do at least get a kill. Not a great trade, though, unfortunately. That did not go all that well. Here's the thing about Akali. At about the 15-minute mark, I think you know whether your Akali is going to be useful or a complete disaster area. Akali really does need to snowball early on and actually get the successful ganks, which absolutely did not happen. Akali did not support the top lane, which has caused Singe to get very far behind Vladimir, a really, really poor position to be in. And as a result, has also not got the kills that she needs in order to be as powerful as she needs to be. Also, going in for these failed ganks means that she's been out of the jungle a lot and is behind on her jungle rotation. Not ideal, is it? Absolutely not. We haven't picked up a dragon yet, for instance, which would be very, very nice to have. And if we had an effective Akali, the chances are we'd be able to do that. That's the thing about pretty much any Dota-style game, that the mistakes of one person have profound impacts upon everybody else on the team. And while you may hear the legends of one amazing player carrying, Dota games do have an individual skill cap. And you might think, oh, well, that individual skill cap's very, very high. I don't think it's really as high as people actually think it is. The reason that I believe that is because I think there's two kinds of skill cap within a Dota game. You've got the individual skill cap, and then you've got the team skill cap. Team skill cap is a much more difficult thing to quantify, and it's much, much higher. The ceiling for skill there is much higher, and it is often very much affected by the current metagame. The individual skill cap, well, you've got to think, what can I actually do with my hero? What can I use my skill in order to do more effectively? And more often than not, your answer is going to be, well, I've got 4 buttons I can push, and I've got attack, and occasionally I can flash and use things like exhausts. And maybe I'll have an item in my bag that I can use, an activatable. But aside from that, I've got to dodge around a little bit and move around a little bit, and that is kind of about it. But as a team, well, that's much, much more important. If you have one amazing player and yet a bad team on one side and a mediocre team on the other, I would expect the mediocre team to actually be able to win. Sure, the great player may end up winning the one lane that he's in, but unfortunately, he's just going to be focused down by the mediocre team in every single team fight and play no further part. He's going to be destroyed, and then his terrible team will also be destroyed in the process. A rather unfortunate situation for him, perhaps, but at the end of the day, this is in fact a team-based game. There's no real doubt about that. Seems like I got just a little bit lucky there. Talon would have most likely destroyed me. He's got reasonable farm at the moment, so a quick dodge into the bush and eating that delicious cake results in me going around. Unfortunately, they do know where I am, but I'm not in a position to be intercepted at present. I'm going to move around to try and support Akali and LeBlanc in the center. I know that Akali is very low on health, but Akali thinks it's a good idea to run away from the support. I beg to differ. I don't feel that this is an optimum strategy. It's the kind of thing that you need to try and avoid. Indeed, the thing that you need to try and avoid in these kind of games is playing your role badly. I think anyone that plays their role to an average level is credit to team. You don't have to be super effective in order to win a game. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, all you need to do as a team is to make less mistakes than the other guy. So you need to just play straight up average. Just don't die too much, get a reasonable amount of farm, and when you go into a team fight, actually focus down the right guys. It really is about as simple as that at this kind of level. You don't have to worry about the more advanced stuff. You need to get your basics in order. Get your fundamentals down. Make sure you know what your role is. Which role do you want to play? Which champions are you most familiar with? And what kind of combination can be put into place? Now, I think you can probably see what's going to end up happening here. Why you would fight close to a tower with Blitzcrank involved? Well, you would do it when you know that you've got a competent support nearby, which, thankfully for them, they do. I did pop off the wish there to try and give it a heal and just keep Tristana alive, but it wasn't quite enough. Tower picks her off, but worthwhile for the amount of damage that LeBlanc did as far as I'm concerned. It would have been nice for the AD carry to actually pick up those kills, but sadly that did not happen. I'm going to stick around in the middle at the moment because LeBlanc is sitting on double runes, and I want to try and keep her alive as much as possible. With an infuse, I'll be able to allow her to continue to push this lane, and there's that mega combo I was talking about there from LeBlanc. That's basically what she's good for. If you can kill a champion using that combo, great. If you can't, well, unfortunately, it's kind of like you shoot your load and there's really nothing you can do for a while. You just kind of sit there on the edge of the bed crying a little bit. Not ideal, is it? No, we don't want that. Welcome to where Singed really shouldn't be at this point. Yeah, that might be a bit of a dead Singed. I'm going to pop down an exhaust right there to slow the target. I actually missed my target. I was going for Talon rather than Alistair, but it turns out this is going to turn into something quite delicious. There we go. Alistair overcommits, and we're able to take him down by the tower, and the follow-up from LeBlanc is going to melt us a Talon, assuming that this goes well, and that Talon goes down. Takes him out. Not too shabby at all. We do lose our LeBlanc in the process, but as far as I'm concerned, kind of worthwhile, and the middle lane is in contention right now. Okay, so what am I buying here? I'm making mistakes with my build. By now, there's one item that I should have that I missed out completely. It completely slipped my mind. And that's the Aegis of the Legion. Yes, folks, Aegis. You've been saying Aegis, you're doing it wrong. As with many super cool words, it can be traced back to ancient Greece. The Aegis was the shield that Zeus carried. And of course, AE in Greek is pronounced E. The A is silent. Why do you get this item? More to the point, why wouldn't you get this item? It's a very important item to get for someone on the team. But the choice of who takes it, well, that is something you need to consider, because if you're playing towards the end game, then your 6 item slots actually come into effect. If a game only goes for 15 to 20 minutes, it doesn't really matter if you have an item which is not necessarily optimal in a slot, but once you get to the 40-50 minute mark, well, yes, optimizing your items is vitally important, because everything is equalized out by that point. The last thing you want is one of your carry heroes running around with an Aegis. Why? Because it's taking up a slot that could otherwise be used for a survivability item or some kind of damage item. That's why it goes on the support. When it comes to Soraka, the Aegis is a fantastic item to have. I'm going to go in here and provide just a little bit of support, because Singed has been having a horrible time up here. There's the teleport coming in. Now you'll notice that I applied the silence to Vlad. I'm going to do that again, which will allow us to pick up the kill on Vlad without him throwing down any kind of other nasty maneuvers, which might end up taking out our Singed or our Tristana. Now, the mistake we end up making here is not going back immediately. We should have just killed Vlad and gotten out of there, because this has enabled them to pick up some pretty sick kills down at the bottom. Singed might be able to get away from this. I most likely will not be able to, unless, of course, my Vlad over here decides to do something incredibly stupid. I get back into the fray since we get some backup from Akali. Unfortunately, I failed to realize that Akali is absolutely useless in this game and is not going to be able to contribute to this fight all that much at all, but might be able to pick up the kill on Blitzcrank. Who am I kidding? No, she's just gonna feed. Oh, Akali. Oh, Akali. That didn't go well. I have no idea what LeBlanc was doing there. I have no idea. Can she pick up the kill on Alistair, you might ask? The answer is yes, but she's gonna die anyway. You might think that's cool because it's 1-for-1 trade. Actually, it's kind of not cool. The problem with taking out Alistair there is that Alistair's been killed quite a lot this game already. Alistair's not actually worth much. Who is? LeBlanc. LeBlanc is worth a lot. LeBlanc has been killing like a boss in the center. Then handing over that amount of gold and experience to the AD carry on the other team in exchange for a support that's really not worth all that much. Not ideal as far as I'm concerned. Could have just been AFK, lag, or anything like that. Sitting in the bush like that was rather curious. However, looks like we're going to be able to take that back from Caitlyn as Tristana jumps in and leaps in, and I cannot imagine why they thought that was a good idea. I really have no idea, and now we can get just a little bit of momentum going. Alistair this game has proven to be fairly useless, so I'm not too worried about him. Even with no items, Alistair can actually be a pain in the arse if you know about the combo, which is headbutt into that ground stomp, which will allow for a nice little knock-up. Very difficult to avoid that. Also, Alistair's a tough nut to crack because of his Unbreakable Will ultimate. It's going to reduce a hell of a lot of damage coming in, so he can be a really tanky support, which makes Alistair one of the preferable choices for support in the bottom lane, or indeed in the jungle, which is what's actually happening here. Alistair's perhaps underrated by some people as a jungle hero, but he works quite well. He's got this sick level 2 gank, where you get your 2 abilities, and then you come in for the gank with the combo, and you can enable a serious amount of killing down in the bottom, or indeed top lane. Alistair wards, as do I, and this is a horrible place to be. This is a terrible, terrible idea, and quite frankly, I think I just enabled my team to get themselves slaughtered. That was a big mistake from me. I shouldn't have gone there. That was a stupid route to go. I should have gone through the jungle down towards the bottom as opposed to go towards the middle lane right there. It was a very, very risky thing to do, and quite frankly, I should be chastised for that. Thankfully, it turns out the enemy team is full of idiots and is also able to feed a kill back to us, so that kind of compensates for the amount of damage that was done there. We lost to Kali, that's really not uncommon anyway, and they ended up losing a couple of champions in the process as well, so it's okay. Things are balanced in our favor in terms of the kills right now. You'll notice my KD sucks. That is intentional. Well, not so much intentional. I don't think anyone intends to have bad KD, but that's simply what happens. LeBlanc is actually crazy. I just want to point this out. LeBlanc has 18 kills. 18. That's insanity. She's got more than half the team's kills. I guess it's just unfortunate that our AP mid didn't really pick a better hero than LeBlanc. The thing about LeBlanc is that she's considered pretty low tier. The reason for that, at least in this solo ranked mode as opposed to competitive, don't even consider competitive tier lists at this kind of elo. It's absurd. It doesn't make any sense. In solo, you've got to think, well, if I'm going to pick an AP mid, what do I want from my AP mid? What kind of ability do I have, not only in the early game, but in the late? And here's the thing about LeBlanc. LeBlanc has very little AoE damage of any description. In fact, her one AoE damage ability involves her dashing into the middle of the enemy team. This is not exactly what I would call ideal. This is a good way to get yourself killed horribly. In terms of utility, she really doesn't have an awful lot. She's designed to smash down a single hero. And that sounds useful, but it's almost like saying, well, she's an assassin, but she's also an AP mid. Like, that's something that Akali's good at as well. That's something a jungler can do. When I see an AP mid, what I want is late game viability. I want to see that AP mid doing a lot of damage to the entire team. And LeBlanc can't do that. Which is why I really don't like her as a hero. If we had an Annie, a Brand, or an Ahri, for instance, or a Karthus, for instance, which we could have had because Karthus wasn't actually banned in this game, if I recall correctly, neither was Ahri, then what we would have had is a much more viable mid. Would we have had as many kills on that mid? Well, that's the debatable thing, isn't it? Because LeBlanc is really good at one thing, assassinating whoever's in the middle lane. Unfortunately, that kind of gives you diminishing returns, because the more money you throw at LeBlanc, the less effective that money becomes. You can only scale to a certain point with a hero like LeBlanc when you don't really have any AoE power. Tier lists are an interesting discussion, aren't they? Some people put far, far too much emphasis on them. Tier lists are really designed as a guide, and as far as I'm concerned, they should be treated in a fairly relative manner. The idea behind a tier list really is, well, why exactly are you picking this hero when you could be picking that hero who does what this hero does better? That's the only thing that you really need to consider, certainly at a lower level. If you have access to multiple heroes that do the same role, think about which one ends up doing it better. More often than not, you'll find that even low-tier heroes, like, say, the Elements tier list, if you go down to tier 4, even arguably tier 5, you're going to look at those heroes, you're going to say, hang on, these heroes are good, I could do really well with that. Yes, you can, that's true, that's not to say that they're not viable. But unfortunately, what it means is, there's often a hero that does the same thing better. When you have a large hero list like you do in League of Legends, that becomes a bigger and bigger problem. How do you balance them all? In fact, I think this is going to end up being the downfall of Riot eventually, because they're going to be struggling really hard to balance all of these heroes and actually make them more viable. What you'll end up having is 150 plus heroes, and yet only 50 of them are reasonable, and at that point, why the hell do you even have that many to begin with? Well, it's not like you're going to remove them from the game, but it becomes harder and harder to balance everything, because once you change one thing, then you might have to change a hell of a lot else. One hero changes, and then suddenly the entire metagame shifts, and you have to think, well, this hero that used to be good as a result of the metagame that was in there right then, well, he's not very good anymore. Ah, well, thankfully we're at least getting a reasonable push going on here. It's okay, Akali's going to just run to her death right here. A nice pick up there by Singed allows us to grab ourselves a Blitzcrank as well as a turret. Very, very cool indeed. At the moment, I've got Spirit Visage, and I've got Cage's Lucky Pick. God, I don't even know. I was doing very, very silly things in this particular game, and I should not, under any circumstances, have gone for Spirit Visage. That just seems silly. I should have probably gone straight for Morello's Evil Tome, which would have been enough to get all the cooldown reduction I could possibly desire. In fact, I think that would have been too much. I would have hit the cap by then. If you want to pick up something like Spirit Visage, then you need to be thinking about, well, do I need Ionian Boots of Lucidity? And if not, what else can I get? Well, in that case, the only other boots you should really be grabbing are Mercury Treads. I mean, that should be obvious to you. What other boots are really useful? The answer is, well, there aren't any. You should be picking up Mercury Treads as opposed to Ionian Boots of Lucidity. Indeed, one might consider, this is actually something I should have done. I didn't do it in this game. It didn't cross my mind. I think we're all just too focused on trying desperately to win or lose as gracefully as possible. I should have sold those boots and actually just swapped them out for Mercury Treads. That would have worked just fine. Now, I picked up Morello's Evil Tome here. Certainly not a bad item by any stretch, but it also gives me another activatable, which could potentially be useful, but it will require me to pick out a very specific target in a fight in order to make it useful. I don't think I really did it too well in this game. Maybe there's a couple of examples of where it's good. What the Morello's Evil Tome does on the activate is it inflicts a grievous wound, which decreases healing to the target and regeneration by 50% for a short period of time. Can be very useful against certain champions, not so useful, of course, against others. This item's designed to make Dr. Mundo cry. It's okay, it's not the ideal item I could have picked here. At this point, I was kind of going into uncharted territory. The build page that I had up only showed me the starting items. I forgot to read the rest of it. A little bit derp, but there you go. So I ended up with far too much cooldown reduction. But hell, at least I'm capped, and it does have some okay stats, I suppose, for a support, but it's nowhere near ideal. And where is my Aegis? It's not there. There is no Aegis, I'm afraid. I do not have one, and that makes me an idiot. I'll tell you what else makes me an idiot, not warding enough. That's something that I have really been slacking on in this game. I've warded every now and again. There's the ward being put on the Baron, which is very important indeed. He's just coming into the center here to fend off the terrible Alistair that's been consistently feeding our team. That almost makes up for our awful Akali and Singed play, but not quite. Another turret picked off in the center, giving us a reasonable advantage in terms of tower numbers. We currently have all three of our back towers up, which is quite significant. That's a good edge to get, and Vladimir explodes as LeBlanc gives him a hug and a kiss. Now would be a pretty damn good time to actually take the Baron, as far as I'm concerned. I think what I should have done here, actually, is get another vision ward and probably pop it a little bit further back in the forest to give us more information. Singed goes in there, takes the ward out. We deliberately stay out of sight range. But let's be honest, that's a clue. There's no other reason for him to be there, and if they don't know about the vision ward, they suspect, oh, maybe there's an oracle's, then he's going there to check it before the Baron attempts to be taken, and there goes off the snipe, and LeBlanc gets picked off immediately. And this is where things start to get a little bit disastrous. Can we actually hold out and take out the Baron? Let's find out. Now, what am I doing? Applying heal to the best target possible. Haven't applied my grievous wound as of yet, and popping my wish there as well. Trying to silence the most important member of the team, and I keep at least our AD carry alive. And that's perhaps the most important thing I could have done there. Quick heal and a mana boost gets her back into play. Easily take out that ward there, and we're not really in a position to take the Baron, but thankfully they aren't either. That's perhaps the most important thing. What we can do is flank around, maybe apply yet another heal, get our AD carry back up into a reasonable semblance of combat readiness, and then continue with a push onto the top here. They've taken a lot of damage. We have as well. Our LeBlanc's back on the field, but Akali and Singed are still down for the count. Now, they lost a couple of heroes too, so they're not exactly in an ideal position either. I have to say the kill death is kind of deceptive because most of those kills are actually on LeBlanc, so perhaps not as useful as I might hope. And the Blitzcrank's now picked himself up a Banshee's Veil just to make matters a little bit worse. Yeah, not exactly ideal. There's the pop on that one. I'm going to try and keep Tristana alive. That should actually not be a problem in this situation. as long as I can slow the Blitz or the Vlad, which I will be able to do, no problem at all. There's the silence going on. Blitzcrank in a little bit of trouble there, but he is fortunate. We have no intention of pursuing him. That will be a little bit dangerous. We don't know where Vlad is, but we now have backup coming up through the lane onto a Baron once again. I have no idea what Akali's trying to do. Solo Baron by the looks of it, which is simply not going to happen in a million years. Thank you very much. That's what LeBlanc is very, very good at. The thing is that this really shouldn't be happening. I mean, under no circumstances should Vlad just be wandering around on his own. It's very, very silly, but then again, it's at low elo, so this kind of thing can actually happen. That's why taking tier lists seriously at low elo is kind of silly, because tier lists make certain assumptions. They make certain assumptions about skill level, they make certain assumptions about the composition and the metagame that's being adhered to, but at low elo, a lot of that really doesn't matter. It's all about just knowing your fundamentals and not sucking. It's really not that hard. Or you could be Akali and die over and over and over again. Something like that, in fact. But yeah, let's feed the Talon. That sounds like a great idea. It's not like Talon hasn't been completely destroying us lately. We'll pick off this ward, get it out of the way since I have oracles. Oracles. God, that item. So much responsibility, so much. And Tristana, with the GA, will be able to stay alive here. I want to try and give her a heal. Able to do that. That'll help just a little bit. There's the silence popped off, and unfortunately, there's nothing I can do in a million years to actually keep her out there. She didn't have her rocket jump, so she couldn't jump over the tree line. But perhaps what I can do is provide just a little bit of support here to Singed, which may result in a dead Talon, and LeBlanc coming in to grab that. There's the heal, which keeps LeBlanc alive, at least for the moment anyway. Singed gets the successful slow. I throw off the exhaust, the silence onto Vladimir, which picks us up a quick kill, putting Alistair in a horrendous position. Speaking of horrendous position, Singed, not exactly in the ideal spot, and suddenly I have pain coming in my general direction. I do have a flash available, but I've been knocked up far too much for that to actually work. Chain CC, and at that point I wish I'd picked up Mercury Treads. But we have ourselves a Shirelias, so not too shabby. I'll give our team just a little bit of a boost, and once again, we get back to a reset kind of situation where the kill count is pretty high on both sides, something of a massacre, and inexplicably Alistair died to creeps because, hey, why the hell not, and oh my, yes, that was what you thought it was. Alistair went down to the Baron, and Akali got absolutely murdered after throwing herself to her death for no apparent reason against a Baroned up and well-fed Caitlyn, because that was going to work out well. Relax, it's late at night. There are stars in the sky, the moon beams down with its eternal and hateful grin upon the people of the world, and it says to you, you know what? There are worse things in life than having a bad Akali on your team. However, I sympathize because there aren't all that many worse things. Okay. So we're up against a Baron. Our Akali is terrible. Our Singed is not doing so well either. Our Tristana and LeBlanc are pretty good, but LeBlanc is pretty much a glass cannon, one-trick pony. What do we do? Well, I'll tell you what we don't do. What we don't do is go and engage them outright in a team fight, because at that stage we really should end up losing. There's no real justification for doing that. There's no reason to. What you should be doing in this situation, grab as many buffs as you can. Make sure you know where the opponents are, get as much farm as possible while you know it's safe to do so, and then get the hell back to the safety of your base towers, because once that Baron buff is up, the clock is ticking. The enemy team will be thinking, I need to make use of this, I need to use this to push, I need to use this to take inhibitors. If you deny them that ability, then they may get impetuous, they may decide to jump into a situation they can't handle, and that is when you can deal with them. Speaking of situation you can't handle, try face-checking a bush, Akali. That sounds like a great idea for you. That did not work out so well at all. But when life gives you lemons, you cut them up and you jam them in the eyes of nearby passers-by, and then you laugh maniacally, or maybe that's just me. But this is an opportunity, I feel. Once again, they got a little bit impetuous. They saw the Akali. The Akali is worthless. She's essentially snack food at this point. We don't really care about the Akali. What we can do is take out some more of your valuable teammates, like this Blitzcrank, for instance. We can also flip the Caitlyn right into the fight, and that was a nice move there by the Singed, and hello. That might be a kill on Talon. Yes, it will, and that is the momentum that you need. An ace for our team, which puts us in a great position to push little lane. What did we lose? We lost Tristana, we lost Akali, so essentially we lost Tristana. That's okay. We can deal with that. We've got 3, we've got support with mana, we've got LeBlanc with cooldown reduction and mana regeneration as well. We have Singed looking a little bit worse for wear, but nonetheless more than capable of pushing this lane, whereas the opposing team don't really have a lot to stop us whatsoever. This should be a nice, easy tower kill. We should be able to grab an inhib without too much of a problem, and at that point, of course, we should be backing the hell off. Alistair is here, and he will be eaten alive. That was a very, very silly thing for Alistair to do. Oh well, never mind. He also placed a bunch of wards. I really don't know if he's actually trying at this point. I really don't, but there we go. I think perhaps there might have been an argument on their team as we were having an argument with our Akali. Alright, there's the inhib. Now we should leave. Will we? No. Of course not. We're not going to leave, are we? No, we're going to do silly things. We're going to do silly things that get us horribly killed. That is how this game ends up working. We end up overextending, getting just a little bit too cocky. The entire team is back up now. Blitzcrank gets himself into a really awkward spot, but he's not dead yet. The thing is, he is fulfilling his role here. Is the tank. He is bringing Akali out of position, shows she can be absolutely smashed to pieces. She very luckily gets away from that, only to be stabbed to death by Talon, who has now picked up the double kill, goes for the triple kill, grabs Singed, and am I getting away from Talon? Do you really think I'm getting away from Talon? How do you presume that I'm going to get away from Talon? The answer is there's no way for me to get away from Talon whatsoever, and that overextension really did cost us the advantage there. Tristana is the only one alive. She does have GA. She is in the center. She is a dangerous individual, but of course she is up against most of the enemy team, and I'm actually quite surprised she sticks around here. Alistair's come in. Nothing will happen, as always. Alistair, I think at this point, may have actually sold all of his items. I don't know. One way or the other, Tristana is hitting like an absolute truck. There's the pickup on Alistair for free. And as long as Blitzcrank doesn't get the good grab on there with the talent to back him up, which is exactly what's happening on the minimap, I think, as you can very clearly see, then Tristana should be okay. Tristana is currently very much not okay, and there's the grab as Vladimir gets the finisher, and the ace as well, and this is where things start to get really, really awkward. In this situation, there's a real possibility of Baron being taken and another push, assuming the Baron is currently back up. I believe at this point Baron has actually just repopped. It is around the 7-minute respawn timer since the Baron was last killed. So yeah, it could be back up, and we don't have any ward coverage over there. Our team's only just got back on the field, and that could get a little bit ugly. We do, however, have super creeps in the center, so at least we do have a little bit of pushing power, assuming our Akali doesn't go and get herself killed again. Now, at this point in late game, what exactly are you doing as support? It's a little bit of column A, it's a little bit of column B, especially as Soraka. You've got to be considering a number of factors. Do you use Infuse on your teammates, or do you use Infuse on the enemy? At this point of the game, chances are you're going to be using it on the enemy. Mana regen shouldn't be a problem for the majority of your team, and it turns out Baron is not quite up yet, but will be very, very soon. So the question is, who do you use it on? Well, you want to be using it on anyone that has the ability to do a really nasty big combo, try and disable somebody, or anyone that's setting up to try and get the kill in a team fight. Interrupt that combination if possible, prevent that hero from doing anything. Also, if you manage to get a hero into the center of your team composition where you can crush him, then try and apply the infuse there in order to prevent any kind of escapability being used, so you can get the nice and easy crush. It really is situational. It's on a case-by-case basis, and of course it comes down to who is within your range, and it doesn't result in you overextending yourself and getting you and your team killed as a result. Generally, once again, not a particularly good idea. You know what else isn't a particularly good idea? That. Yes, that was actually a pretty damn terrible idea. Singe takes a huge amount of damage in the process. We get a free Alistair because, hey, why not? But unfortunately, Tristana ends up over there. LeBlanc is in the center, and no amount of healing that I can apply is going to be able to keep LeBlanc alive in the middle of that. Absolutely not, and this turns into one big snowballing kind of disaster area. You know, at this point, I have to wonder whether or not it was a good idea just to let Singe die. I personally thought that was quite stupid. It's not the worst thing in the world. I can think of worse things. Being eaten by a shark is a worse thing. Slowly dying from a particularly smelly and virulent fungus. Not ideal. But in this case, this is pretty much up there. Singe decided to charge in, get himself in a little bit of trouble. Claims he could have gotten out of that. Not really convinced, honestly. Not with the amount of CC and damage that was coming out from the enemy team. I don't think he was getting out of that in a million years, but hey, there you go. We decided to fight, and it was a mistake to do so. But then again, these are the trials and tribulations of solo ranked folks. The kind of communication that you would have in a 5-person team that would say either, let me die, guys, let me die, or, my god, don't engage here, pull back. That's not available. And that's something that you've got to account for. People are going to do stupid things, and they're not going to tell you about it. You're going to have to try and figure out exactly what your teammates want to do without being able to talk to them, which is, as far as I'm concerned, extremely difficult to do. I think that contributes to the nasty nature of solo ranked, honestly. What you've essentially got is an environment where people don't want to communicate with each other outside of raging. Why? Because it's not very easy to do. They don't have voice over IP. There are fairly minimal ways to communicate without actually typing to someone. You can highlight on the map and you can call retreat. That's pretty much it. LoL does not do the whole communication without typing thing very well. Other games do it better. Dota 2 does it better. Smite does it better. And it's something that I think Riot needs to really look into. To be honest, I'd steal the VGS system from Smite. It's absolutely fantastic. Now, the question is, can we get ourselves a Baron? Yes, we can. No problem at all. The enemy team was caught completely out there. We also have a couple of oracles, because, hey, why not? At this stage, it kind of makes sense. It's pretty late on in the game. And the first thing to do is now to B and make sure that we're in a good position to actually receive any kind of attack they can bring our way, or indeed start a unified push. It's one of the things that you should be doing if you have the Baron buff. Consider, well, is there an area that I can push and force a team fight? Because I have the advantage, since I have the Baron buff. What the enemy team will be trying to do is essentially avoid you or pick you off individually. Now, if you are running around as a team of 5, you can generally avoid that happening. Admittedly, that's not always the best way to do things. It very much depends on your situation. If you're getting a lane heavily pushed, for instance, especially if you lost an inhib, then you may wish to leave someone there to clean that up. Otherwise, you'll be taking far more damage than is worthwhile. But aside from that, a good push up the center is usually a reasonable idea when you have the Baron buff in order to try and force an encounter. At the moment, we have 4. You'll see that Tristana's lagging behind somewhat. Akali's no doubt going to charge in and get killed, as she always does. I think I'll just like to go back to my point on communication, actually, for a second. You'd be surprised, I think, how feeling helpless can seriously affect you psychologically when playing a game like League. Alright, let's have a look at this fight. So, Blitzcrank gets the pull, doesn't really get anything out of it. So at the moment, this is fine. Quick heal on Akali to make sure she's back up, and we try to look to take out the second inhib, which shouldn't be too much of a problem. Currently, their Alistair is there, so that's potentially a threat. A knock-up combo would be a mistake, but what we did do here, which was the mistake, was split up. That's put Singed in a really bad position. LeBlanc gets in there and does her usual nuking, but also gets into the center of combat as a result of that. I try my best to keep them up, but at the end of the day, I can't keep them all alive. We survive just a little bit longer as a result of that. Singed could take the hits, but constantly standing next to the tower is really not getting him anywhere whatsoever. I melt under the attacks of Talon, needless to say, and there's the ace for the enemy team. Not ideal. But we did get 2 inhibs out of that, so that's not too bad. Also, a lot of their team is dead, so any attempts whatsoever to have a really big, effective push, especially down the center lane, isn't really going to help that much. They can't beat the Nexus with only 2 people, especially considering we're going to be up on our feet fairly shortly. It's not really a great idea. I'm quite surprised they did that. What I would have done in this situation is actually gone and immediately push top or bot. That would have put us in an unpleasant spot where we're also 2 inhibs down. You'll notice that they kind of realize this is a terrible idea. Let's go and push top instead. But Talon and Blitz have already taken a ton of damage from the Nexus towers. As soon as one of our heroes actually gets back up on the field, which will be in about 10 seconds, we'll be able to clean them up, no problem. We do lose an inhib at the top, but that could have been far more effective. If they've gone straight for bottom and then hopped up to top, we would have lost all 3 inhibitors. We would be struggling a lot. Incidentally, Chalice of Harmony, not a very good buy. I really don't know why I bought that. That was a very silly thing to do. Alright, we're 2 inhibs down, they're 2 inhibs down, we're all back on our feet. What we need is a concerted push that will actually allow us to win the team fight. Whoever wins the team fight at this stage is probably winning the game, because the respawn times have got stupidly long. There are super creeps which they won't be able to deal with on either side. The problem is, since we both have super creeps on more than one lane, we've got to think, well, how exactly are we going to deal with this? Usually what you want to do here is a 4-man push down whatever lane you have super creeps in, and then a 1-man defense to make sure the super creeps don't make their way to the Nexus towers and actually destroy them. So a push down the middle makes sense here. We just need to leave one person to clean that up, or at least push the lane far enough. They can come and back you up later on, as long as they've pushed the lane back so much that it's going to take a while for the super creeps to make their way to your base. Up the center right now. Going together makes the most sense. LeBlanc wants us to stay in base. I really do disagree with that attitude, but unfortunately, since we don't really have a choice one way or the other, LeBlanc being our biggest cannon on the team at the moment, we're going to have to just do what LeBlanc says. I don't necessarily agree with this. I think that a push up the middle would have made sense. We've managed to push the top lane back up to almost the halfway point, which means that the super creeps are going to take a while to get to us. We could have effectively pushed that middle lane and actually done some damage here, but at the moment that's not going to happen. So we're going to try and receive whatever charge is coming in their direction. That at least gives us a little bit of time to prepare. Also gives me a little bit more time to talk about communication. People don't like to be given advice online. They feel that what they're doing is the right thing to do, and changing their ways is difficult. Once they get set in it, they get mentally committed to their playstyle. If they're feeling criticized, then the first thing they will claim is, oh god, it's trolling. And sometimes it is. More often than not, in fact, you'll find that it is trolling. But if someone is trying to give you advice and saying, well, I don't think you're doing very well because of this, this, and this, it is worth listening to them. I think, though, the lack of communication systems within League actually does contribute to a very negative attitude amongst its player base, especially in solo ranked. You've got to play it a very specific way, and if someone isn't playing it that way, then you're in a lot of trouble. Alright. This is an opportunity for us. We decide to push in here. We immediately go for Talon. Taking Talon out would be a good idea, but the question is, will we get the opportunity to do so? Singed eats the majority of the damage coming in. I throw some heals on Singed to make sure he can stay alive. Popping my Locket of the Iron Solari to give our team just a little bit more. Unfortunately, that did not work out the way that I hoped it would. Absolutely not. So we split up to try and get away from Vlad. I'll be able to silence Vlad. We may be able to turn this around, and Vlad actually overcommits as his team dashes off, and Tristana is able to melt him no problem at all. This actually puts us in a decent position. The only hero we're down, if you look at it, is Akali. Akali is useless anyway. This is actually a pretty decent opportunity, so I would suggest that we take it. We're deliberately sending one hero back to make sure we deal with the super creeps on the top lane. Otherwise, we're going to be taking Nexus damage, and Alistar's charging down the center to back that up, as well as Talon. So if we can actually rush through here with Tristana, as well as LeBlanc and myself in support, this might end up working out. Break through the Banshee's Veil right there, and hopefully try and keep Tristana alive as much as possible. We're able to do that. Inhib is back up. We need to try and bash that down as quickly as we can, which we will be able to do. Tristana has decided now is the time to back off, since we don't actually have LeBlanc backing us up. She went back as well in order to defend and deal with the push that was coming into our base. So we're still in a reasonable position. Our team is back on their feet, except for Akali, but that's probably for the best. Guardian Angel is back up for Tristana as well. So we're in a position where we can take a little bit of a risk, and a risk is perhaps what we need at this stage in order to make this work. Alright, this might be a free Alistar. Yeah, I think it probably is going to be. And Talon actually out of position too. That was not a good idea from Talon, but he was able to get out of there. Rather fortunate. Caitlyn's got a GA on as well, so Singed is overly paranoid by the looks of it. Admittedly, we don't have LeBlanc. She went back to defend again, and Akali's just back on her feet. So this would be 3 on 5. Not exactly a wise move, so I don't really blame Singed for that attitude. Singed's going to back around the side. We need to regroup the team again and actually make another push. We have the means to win a team fight, but the focus has got to be there, which is currently not what I'm seeing from a few of our heroes here. I have to focus too, because I've got to focus with my Morello's Evil Tome, as well as my Infuse ability. Make sure I heal the right character. Is exactly what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to pop the heal on the tank. Makes perfect sense. That makes Singed very, very difficult to deal with. Akali, as always, is useless in this situation. However, this is still a good spot for us. The nice nuke goes on, bringing Talon down immediately after the combo from LeBlanc. I come in for support and immediately throw down yet another infuse to stop Talon from actually getting away or popping alien abilities and assassinating LeBlanc. Into the center I go. My aim right here is to try and keep Tristana alive as much as possible, given the means that she needs. She is, after all, the carry. She's the one that's supposed to be doing the cleanup. She manages to do that. A couple of star calls, reduces the magic resistance. There is the ace that we actually needed, and this should be the win for us after a fairly long, sloggy kind of game. That game was a damn mess. I think I learned a lot about Soraka while actually playing this, especially from the build standpoint and who to best target with my abilities. So I'm looking forward to playing a little bit more support, actually. That's going to be my binge for the moment. I feel that solo ranked playing as support is a fairly rewarding thing to do. It's pretty chill as well, which is always nice to do late at night when I'm not really paying any attention. There you go, folks. A bit of late night LoL for you with Soraka. Warts and all. I'll see you next time.